Hello, and welcome to segment 2 of our study of Chinese theater. Today we're going to talk about Chinese history, and there are literally hundreds of different dynasties and rulers and eras in Chinese history, but I want to touch on a handful of them that illustrate a handful of sort of major concepts about who Chinese people are, what it even means to be Chinese, and also to track the development of Chinese performing arts in a couple of different ways. So the first stop on our Chinese history tour is going to be the Han Dynasty from 206 BCE to 220 CE. So that's about a 400-year stretch there, a pretty long time for one family to rule and control territory. When we talk about the things that the Han Dynasty did, I'll show you a map here in a second of the size of the territory, but this was an era under which the Great Wall of China was completed, which is a staggeringly large undertaking for this era, and I'll give you some comparisons of that in a minute. And generally speaking, the Han Empire, there illustrated in yellow, is geographically gigantic. And by way of comparison, we'll take a look at, here's our image of the Roman Republic, which, as we've noted previously, is a pretty damn large amount of territory. Let's lay over top of that the Han Empire. About as large as, and even a little bit larger than, what the Romans were able to conquer with the Roman Republic. Another good way to look at this is compare it to the size of the United States. We'll overlay the Han Empire there, and as you can see, an absurd amount of territory, and also the length of the Great Wall itself is pretty shocking. It would run from roughly New York City to Denver, Colorado, if you were to drive along its length. And if you straighten it out, it would be even longer than that. But the reason I mention this is that, first off, the comparisons between China, different Chinese empires, and the Roman Republic / empire are pretty valid in terms of what their entertainment was trying to do. But also it's to note that there is no Chinese theater. There are different regional varieties of performance styles, and we're going to talk about a handful of different ones, but these are just sort of some interesting developments in the era. So we're talking about massive territory, and during the Han Dynasty, one of the things that developed were imperial court entertainments. So at the Emperor's Palace in the capital of the Han Empire, we're talking about acrobatics, circus-style entertainments, music, dance, juggling, mimes. No actual scripted plays yet, but the development of all kinds of different regional forms. And so if you're from a really far-off corner of the Han Empire, but your region has developed an interesting cultural entertainment, you may be called to perform at the Emperor's Palace. So this is a little Han Dynasty pottery statuette of a female dancer who would have appeared in an imperial court entertainment. And this is from the Han era. So all kinds of different sorts of entertainment, but nothing even resembling formal theater. Our next stop will be in the Tang Dynasty, roughly 300 years. And again, you notice I've skipped quite a lot of time here. But one of the things the Tang Dynasty developed was a little bit more formalized theatrical storytelling through short comic skits and puppet shows here. And the image on the left is a traditional regional style, Tang style of puppetry, and you can see they're not super complex figures, but they're kind of ornate. They're pretty small, so it's nothing terribly complex. The other interesting thing that happens over the course of the Tang Dynasty is this vague bunch of regional theater forms sort of move towards a distinctive Chinese style of theater, and I'll talk about what that style is. But it really is during this era that this started to happen, and in support of that, the Tang Emperor established the Pear Garden, which was an actual school for performers to come and train. And by and large, this stresses on pop culture entertainment, so big, fun, easy stuff for the masses. But the scope, at one point in time, the Pear Garden enrolled 11,409 students dedicated only to the art of theater, right, of various performance and entertainment forms. Even today in China, a student of the Pear Garden, that phrase is equivalent to being a thespian here in America or in Europe. So they're the lineage and roots of sort of Chinese theatrical history in the Tang Dynasty. Next up, we'll talk about the Yuan Dynasty, and this is the period in which we are living during our play. So as you read Autumn in the Palace at Han, think about the geography and cultural context that I'm going to cover here. China is under Mongol rule, and in continuing our thinking about world history in terms of maps and scope, There were 4 main khanates when the Mongols ruled. And take a look at this map. They pretty much ruled the entire Eastern Hemisphere, all the way from Saudi Arabia on one end to Korea and Japan on the other end. And 4 different areas were ruled by 4 different Mongol khans, but they were all Mongol. And this is the era of Genghis Khan. And during this time, then, the Mongols have conquered, as you can see here, all of geographical China. Interestingly enough, being under Mongol rule does exactly the opposite of what you would think. It creates a golden age of Chinese literature and theater. So why would being conquered by foreign invaders create a golden age in your country? It's just kind of something to think about and possibly an opportunity for an annotation. And during this golden age, the Chinese people embraced the practice and perfection of all kinds of native Chinese folk arts. So these sort of lineages that I've been talking about with the previous dynasties and different forms, puppetry and other forms of performance, juggling, etc., sort of really were focused on under the Yuan Dynasty. So again, China's being ruled by foreign invaders, and we have this really odd thing that happens. And one of the reasons we think it happens is because when the Mongols came in and took over China, they kicked everybody out of the government. All the Chinese people, the intellectuals and the thinkers and the movers of Chinese culture, were essentially fired from their jobs in the government. And one of the things that historians suspect is they had nothing better to do, and in a sort of pro-nationalist way, they wanted to find a way to maintain Chinese culture even though they were under foreign rule. So this is one of the things that we think resulted in this golden age. Now, during this era, censorship is still kind of a pretty aggressive thing, right? The Mongols are interested in letting the Chinese have their entertainment, but they don't want anything too aggressive and radical. And so as you read Autumn in the Palace at Han, I want you to think about it from 2 different perspectives. One, pretend you're an outsider, right? A Mongol ruler. Here's a play written by, for, and about Chinese people. How does it make you feel about the people you rule over? And after you think about that, flip it and consider yourself a Chinese person who is under Mongol rule. We tend to think about, we tend to have a certain mindset about resistance plays, or if think about a Jewish play under Nazi rule, or think about any sort of oppressed people, what kind of play they're going to put on. So how does the play Autumn in the Palace at Han make you as a Chinese person feel about being ruled by outsiders? Does it look like the kind of resistance play we might expect from a conquered people? And it is in some ways clearly a resistance play, and in some ways it is different and smarter than that. And off on the right here we have a little an artist's interpretation of a scene from Autumn in the Palace at Han, just to sort of put a little historical perspective in there. So those are our main Chinese historical eras that we're going to consider when we think about this play. I also want to talk about the style of drama, which we refer to as Yuan drama because obviously it took place under the Yuan Dynasty. I'm going to talk about music, and I'm going to talk about staging. And the music, I'm going to show you a video clip here in just a minute. The music of Yuan drama is generally very simple accompaniment, but music is constant and pervasive throughout the drama. There is typically, rather than our American or Western musical forms, there's a 7-tone scale. So when you hear the clip here in a minute, listen to a very different approach. Anyone who's taken any music theory will be able to hear immediately where this difference comes from. And even if you haven't taken music theory, you're going to be able to hear, like, this music sounds fundamentally different than ours. And it's mainly because of that 7-tone scale. 10 to 20 songs or arias in a given Yuan drama, and all of them are sung by the protagonist. So that's another important thing to remember as you read Autumn in the Palace at Han. This is a musical. And when the protagonist has long stretches of dialogue, he is singing, and it's just kind of something to keep in mind. Now, the clip coming up here in the next slide is not Yuan drama, but it does demonstrate some really important characteristic musical and visual elements of Chinese performance styles. And there are all kinds of different Chinese performance styles. There's Beijing opera. There are just a big, long list. I've just chosen this brief clip to give you a sort of representative idea of what it's all about. So, first of all, apologies, that was a little bit loud. But you see the general high stylization and high importance on visual appeal, but only in a certain context, right? And you heard that music, which is a very different kind of sound, as I've mentioned. So in addition to the musical background, we also have some staging notes that I want to make on Yuan drama. And again, the clip I showed you is not Yuan drama, but there are some real similarities. Yuan is almost always on a bare stage with a detailed, ornate, decorative backdrop. The backdrop is not a realistic representation of location or place. As you can see down here, this is an old Yuan mural. It's a reconstruction from a 1324 mural. But you can see the backdrop doesn't depict a literal place, but it does have thematic elements to it and provides ornate decoration. And then you see our Yuan characters in the image are standing on essentially a bare stage. In the video clip, the stage was a little bit more ornate in terms of the throne and everything, but in true Yuan drama, there's really not much at all going on stage. And that means then that the emphasis will be on the detailed, colorful costumes, the heavy face makeup, and it's a very, again, stylized, aesthetic, presentational drama. We are not attempting realism in any way, shape, or form. So either based on what you've seen in this lecture or after you read Autumn in the Palace of Han, here's an opportunity for an annotation as well. Like, how does Yuan drama compare, both same as and different from, other Western drama styles, both Rome and Greece, that we've seen so far? And that is the end of the lecture. Thank you very much.